Hi everyone. So yes, today we're going to talk about test-driven development with Vue.js. So my name is Dayan. I work at Algolia, and I love Vue. I also love open source. I really love this trust relationship that is created through open source. You create something, and I can use it in my project, and I can create something that you will use in your project, and you trust me for it. And I think that that's actually beautiful. And that is why I believe that testing is one of the pillars of writing robust software. It doesn't matter if your code is dirty, if you repeat yourself, if it's not that performant. It's less of an issue than if you do not have tests. Because you can always refactor dirty code. And tests actually make that easy. But it's a lot harder to refactor something that does not have tests. Tests should give you confidence that you are not shipping broken software. That's it. Tests are practical. It's not about making your tech lead happy. You don't get bonus points if you add 1 or 2 extra tests. Tests are a lifeline. They help you make sure that when you ship new code, you don't break old stuff that used to be working. Yeah, but testing can be tough, right? Especially with UI components. And as a result, we often neglect tests. I don't know about you, but when I'm done writing a component and it's time to test, I look at the finished code and I'm like, I have no idea where to even start with it. What should I even be testing? Should I go for like the HTML structure? Should I test, like call all the methods one by one? Should I go for 100% coverage? Like I heard that was a thing. Is it a unit test that I should be writing, an integration test, an end-to-end test? That's complicated, right? So what often happens? We procrastinate. We say, I'll do that later. And we ship without tests. Or we do it last minute and we write incomplete tests. Or we go defensive and we test everything. And the problem with those kinds of approaches is that with time, we test less and less, or with less precision. And in the worst case scenario, we do it never. So by show of hands, who ever pushed code to production without tests? I love this moment. And you know, it doesn't matter because in all those scenarios, you never really feel confident about hitting that deploy button. And I don't know about you, but me, I'm not really a fan of spending my nights and weekends fixing issues that could have been caught by automated tests, you know? So is there anything that we can do to fix this? Introducing TDD, test-driven development. So that's not a new process. It was popularized by this guy, Beck. And it's a development process where you write tests before you write the associated code. And what it results in is better, more robust code that behaves as expected. And if you're not familiar with TDD, it goes in 3 simple phases. First one is called red. So the idea with red is that you write a spec. You write a specification of like how the code should behave. So that's your first test. Then you run it and you make sure that it fails, because you need to see that your code can fail. And you need to see why your code can fail. Then you move on to the green step. So here the idea is to make your test pass the quickest way, the quickest possible way. And you do it with the simplest, most stupid code that you can write. It is not about like writing proper code. It's about fulfilling the contract that you've established in the red step. And finally, when your test passes, you can move on to refactoring. And so here, you're going to work on the actual implementation. You can remove the stubs. You can work on performance. But the goal is to make sure that your test stays green. So what does that have to do with Vue.js? Well, I believe that TDD and Vue are a great fit because testing components can be quite counterintuitive. It's not as straightforward as testing a plain function. So the idea is that instead of trying to guess what to test from finished code, what you're going to do is you're going to reverse the relationship. You're going to focus on what the component should be doing, but without caring about how it does it. And what it will result in is you testing only the public API, but not forgetting anything. All right, so we're going to build this component. So this is a file upload widget, and so we have a title saying how many files we're uploading, the total size, and a progress bar. So we're going to test this right now. So in TDD with Vue, with Vue test utils that Jessica talked about yesterday, and with Jess, the test runner from Facebook. Coding time, this is the scary part for me. All right, so welcome to my editor. Can everybody see properly? Shout if you can't. Okay, you can see. So we have the component. As you can see, this is a single file component. It only has the boilerplate for a Vue component, but it's empty. And we have a spec, and so we're importing what we need from Vue test utils. We're importing the component. We're mounting the component before each test and destroying it after each test, so everything is clean. So let's get started with our first test. So remember, we want to show how many files we're uploading. So let's define those files that we're uploading. So, okay, we're going to create files. It's going to be an array of files. So let's say it has a name, document.pdf, and a size. So JavaScript, I'm not really a fan of messing with floating point math. So let's go with integers and represent that in bytes. So let's say 3.2 megabytes, that would be 3,200,000 bytes. And I'm going to add a second file, and it's going to be document2, and it's going to be 4.3 megabytes. And then I can pass my files as a prop to my component. So I can do props data and pass my files. Okay, my files are passed, and now I can write my first test. So, simple test, it renders how many files are being uploaded. I pass my function, and here what I can simply do is expect wrapper, my component, dot find, so I'm going to go for the title, text to be uploading 2 files. Okay. And now I'm going to run this test, and I want it to fail. So yarn test unit, and let's watch this. And so here, if things are done properly, my test should be failing because we're in the red step. And there are 2 reasons. The title element does not exist in the component, and even when it exists, it doesn't have the proper text. So let's wait a little bit for Jess to run a bit. And here, yes, indeed, it tells us I'm failing. I cannot find the title element. So no problem. Let's simply use that output from Jess as a feedback loop. You want a title element? I'm going to give you a title element. Okay, I save. I'm done. I just follow what Jess tells me. And here, my error should be changing. Okay, great, this is progress. We have the element, but now it's telling us expected uploading 2 files, received nothing. No problem. Let's go to the green step. What is the simplest way to make this pass? Simply typing this. Uploading 2 files. I save, and this should be passing. It's passing, perfect. Now I can move on to refactor. And so let's refactor it. I'm going to receive my prop, so files, it's of type array, and here instead of this static text, I can do simply files.length. And my test should still be passing. Perfect, we finished the first cycle of TDD. Let's move on to the next. So now we want to show the total file size. So it renders the total file size. And so here, same thing, I can do expect wrapper.find size text to be, so 32 plus 43, 75, 7.5 megabytes, right? We save, red step, we do not have size, so this time I'm going to go a bit faster. Let's say we do this, and we hard code 7.5 megabytes. So I'm respecting the contract, green step fulfilled. Now I can move on to a refactor. And so because this is a computed size, what is better than a computed property? So let's write a computed property. And so here the beauty is that even if we're writing a computed property, if tomorrow I decide to change, I can, because I'm not testing that I have a file size computed property. I just test the output. So let's first get this total file size. So const total size, and I'm going to use this file's reduce, okay? So accumulated value, the size of the current element. I'm going to do accumulated plus size, start at 0. And I'm going to return total size divided by 10 to the power of 6, right? Because it's in million in bytes, bytes to megabytes, plus space megabytes. This should be working. If I change this to my computed property, my test should still be passing. Awesome. Let's go to the third step. Remember that progress bar? So imagine that we are passing a second prop that should be the progression, and we could update it as we get a new value. So let's do progression, let's say maybe 50%. Okay, no problem. And so I'm going to render the progression as a progress bar. Cool. And here I can do expect wrapper.find progress bar attributes this time because I want to test the width of the element. So style to contain width 50%. Okay, I save. It will fail because I do not have a progress bar, so I can create it. Add my style hard-coded, 50%. This should be passing. Is it going to pass? Isn't it going to pass? Okay, it's passing, and so now I can refactor easily by simply passing my progression prop. It's of type number, and here instead of passing a string literal, I'm going to pass an object literal, all right? Object literal, and here I'm going to simply interpolate my progression %, and it should still be passing. And it's still passing. We've finished implementing our component with TDD. Awesome. Ship this to QA. And so you ship this to QA, and OK, so you get an email back a few days after, and they're like, OK, so I tested that new component that you created, and it looks really cool, but I've encountered a bit of an issue. So you're like, oh, OK, tell me about it. So you open the first attachment. And the first attachment is the data that they passed. And you're like, OK, those files look legit. I guess the size is smaller, but looks good to me. And then you open the second attachment. Oh, OK. So we have an issue here because we're still like the data is correct, but we're showing the size always in megabytes. And from a Vue logic, like a user's perspective, it's not really intuitive to see such a small size represented in megabytes. We would like maybe when it's below 1,000, show it in kilobytes, right? So let's fix this. And the beauty is TDD is excellent for fixing issues. Because what is an issue? An issue is really a situation where you know what you want, and you know that you don't have it. So this reverse engineering mindset of TDD is really well suited for that, because you're going to be able to start from what you want and you don't have, and work your way to a working implementation. So coding time again. Let's fix those issues with TDD. I'm going to simply write the test for it. So it renders the size in kilobytes when under 1,000 bytes. Passing a function. So this time I'm going to reassign wrapper because I want to pass different props. So shell amounts, file loader. I'm going to pass new props. So props data, files, and I'm going to copy paste my files from earlier. Here, just copy paste it and change the value in size, right? And here what I can do is simply the same as earlier. Expect wrapper.find size text to be. And this time what I would expect is 0.75 kilobytes, right? And so this is going to fail because this is not implemented yet. So let's go for it. And it's failing. Yes, it tells us what we currently have on the screenshot, but not what we want. So no problem, let's go to green step. So the easiest way I can make this pass is simply saying, if total size is below 1,000, then you're going to return total size divided by 10 to the power of 3 plus kilobytes. This should be working. This should be working. It's not working because, this should be working. Okay, perfect. So now, before we move on to the refactor, you may be thinking, okay, that works for kilobytes, megabytes. What about gigabytes? What about terabytes? So before we move on to refactor, let's write another test. I'm going to copy paste this test here. And let's say it renders the size in gigabytes. So that would be when we're approaching the billions, right? So when over, so it would be 9,999,999, right? I'm going to go with one file. It's going to be simpler, and so we're going to go with 9 billion. So it should be 9 zeros. And that should be 9 gigabytes. And OK, it's not working. Awesome, red step. So let's refactor it. If total size is over 9,999,999, we should go with return total size divided by 10 to the power of 9 plus gigabytes, right? This should be working, and now we can refactor. So I'm not going to go too deep inside the math behind that, but what we can do is import a utility that does that under the hood, because you can see that we always have the same statement, and what changes is the power and the unit. So let's import get power and unit. And this is actually a utility that you can build on the side using TDD and simply use it in your component. So I'm going to use that, and basically what it does here is that it returns the power and the unit from the total size. So it calculates the order of magnitude, and then it returns what I need. And now I can remove all those duplicate statements and do power here, unit, don't forget the plus, and this should be working. Great, we fixed our issues with TDD. That's great. And we tested everything that matters to us. So you may still be wondering, okay, you just said that we tested everything that matters to us, but there are things that we did not test, like we don't test that we have an H2, for example, in the component, or a span, or stuff like that. And yes, this is true because testing scenarios highly depend on the contract that you establish with your end users. And so there is actually a single awesome question that you can ask yourself every single time that you're not really sure about what to test. Do I care about this if it changes? Does anyone care about this if it changes? If you care, you need a test. If you don't care, you don't need a test. if you don't care and somebody else might care, you need to document it. Please document it. Okay, so we talked about many things, and that's a lot of information, and it's we're just before the break, so let's see what you should be memorizing from this presentation. First is that TDD helps you write robust tests, not too many and not too few. Using TDD for UI components really help you focus on what should be part of the public API and what is internal details. Second is that TDD encourages refactors, which leads to better software design. One of the things that I love with TDD is that it helps you focus on the right things. Your software's contract is infinitely more important than the way you implement it. Let me say that again. Your software's contract is infinitely more important than the way you implement it. The implementation will change. It is not an if, it is a when. You will get better, the language will evolve, it will change. Your contract is important. The implementation does not matter that much. Third is that fixing issues is far more costly than preventing them. If you ever had to fix a critical production issue, okay, so first raise your hand, and probably more people than that. So you remember the feeling, that horrible feeling of holding the wound on a surgical patient with one hand and trying to operate with the other end, Like, it's messy, it's suboptimal. There is a high chance that you're going to mess something up in the process. It's horrible. Nobody should be writing software like that. Nobody should be working like that. This is not how you write quality software. And that's really the beauty of TDD. The time it takes is worth it. If you care about writing tests that are helpful, you should be concerned about making those tests good in the first place. And that's what TDD helps you with. Write only tests that matter, only tests that help, and that will make you feel more confident. So I would kindly encourage you to try TDD. If you're not even convinced right now, try it for a limited period of time and measure the results. If you're not sure about using TDD in a project to build features because it's intimidating, you know what? Fix issues with TDD. Take your issue board, find an issue that you understand, and fix it with TDD. It's really atomic, and you get a non-regression test. Like, who doesn't like that? And you might discover, okay, I tried, and it's not my thing. But you may also discover a technique that makes you much more confident about hitting that deploy button. Thank you very much.